Hello, it is I, Bacho, and today we'll be talking about the 2019 movie Midsommar, directed by Aster. I've wanted to make a video on this film for quite a while, as supposedly it's one of my favourite films of all time, at least within the 21st century. I'm always going on about it in my videos, and I'm really curious to see if it holds up, so today we're going to do a little bit of a dissection, maybe. It's quite a big deal to me, because it helped me become the man I am today, which is a horrible piece of shit, so what does that tell you? It's an A24 movie, and for those of you who aren't aware, A24 is a production company that are known for producing or distributing art house cinema. With the films they produce, they allow their directors a lot of creative freedom, and I would deem Midsommar as the poster child for A24, because it would be extremely influential in establishing the visual tonalities that modern A24 is known for. An emphasis on nature as well as various Scandinavian or Celtic mythologies or whatnot. You see that with films like The Green Knight or Men, and just the depiction of cultism in general has become quite the popular motif because of Midsommar. I think a lot of films that have come since have taken at least some inspiration from the movie, especially films like The Menu, which almost feels quite derivative actually. There's also another thing I'd want to address about the film, which is the Wicker Man criticism. A lot of people think that Midsommar itself is rather derivative of the 1973 film The Wicker Man, and I do not agree with that hypothesis at all, and throughout this video I kind of mean to argue against that.
Välkomna till festen som vi har förberett oss för i 90.
We'll be talking about the director's cut today, which is the 2-hour 50-minute extended version, which includes numerous extra scenes, so therefore extra kino. We're doing the whole 9 yards, or the whole 10 yards in my case. And lastly, before we begin, I must preface, do not attempt to review this film on your own at home. Leave it to the professional YouTube film reviewers. Thank you.
That is so fucking annoying.
So in case you're unfamiliar, Midsommar is a film that revolves around the character Dani as well as her boyfriend Christian. Both of them are at university, and this relationship of theirs leaves much to be desired, let's just say. It's a thing that really should end, that would be the healthiest option. Christian appears to be overwhelmed by Dani's emotional family baggage. Dani has this emotionally disturbed younger sister who's always causing her great amounts of stress. Christian, being the boyfriend you'd expect to, at least in some ways, act as a sort of pillar of support for Dani, cannot handle such a task, and instead of just being honest with himself and his girlfriend, he bottles it up, and he remains in a relationship that he really does not want to be in. What's awful is he's resentful about his predicament, and he transfers that resentment onto Dani. He ends up convincing both himself and Dani that it's all her fault, when in fact it's very much his. There is a lot more going on that front, but for now, as a plot summary, I'll just leave it there. Christian and this set of friends he has at uni are planning this Swedish trip in the summer, and he begrudgingly invites Dani along, to the dismay of the friends as well. The trip in question is to an ancestral Swedish commune in which they'll be partaking in a midsummer festival, and because it's a horror film, things turn awry. They get witchy. So this whole film is about taking this crooked-ass relationship, and that's being generous, as well as this fairly toxic friend group, and it's planting them slap bang in the middle of this paganistic festival. What drama may ensue?
Fuck you.
No, dude, not fuck me. Find your own subject.
As things unfold, it becomes a study/desolation of Christian and Dani's relationship, as well as the ties that Christian has with his particular group of friends. It's a psychological horror/character study. That's all I'll say on the plot for now. I think it's time we got into the review. That's what we're all here for, the big boy review. So this is my third time viewing this film, and honestly I don't have any major complaints. The end. Get off the stage, you disgusting fat fuck. Get off the stage, you disgusting fat fuck. I'm unsure as to whether it's still one of my favourite films of all time, as the first viewing is always the most impactful, and it will never quite live up to that. for me at least. The thing is, it's a film that stays with you, so I really didn't feel the need to rewatch this other than to familiarise myself for this review. Aesthetically, I think it's one of the most unique films of the 21st century, and it's not just because it's the juxtaposition between the bright imagery and the dark subject matter, it's the fact that it takes place within this idealistic backdrop for the majority of the runtime and doesn't really rely on the usual horror motifs. The motifs of darkness, dark shadows, everything taking place at night time, usual horror stuff. When horrific and frightening things do occur, they take place during the brightest intervals of the day. And yet it's still utterly effective in its horror, more so in fact than if it was just using the conventional aesthetics. It's uncanny to see such atrocities in these idyllic contexts. Because the film does not wait until nighttime to bust out the scares, any point during the film, any scene, something awful could occur. At any point, a monstrous thing could just happen out the blue, and it's probably what makes it so tense. You can't trust that apparent warmth that all of the scenes are giving off. And just for that, I think the atmosphere that it creates is masterful, arguably the best part of the film, especially with the lighting and the cinematography. Each shot that depicts the Swedish Midsommar contains the perfect array of colour. The film opens with a mural, and that's how I view most of the shots in the film. They are presented to us as murals. It's been said before, but every frame is a painting. The slight glow that it incorporates into the shots is the final finishing touch. It's the perfect level of brightness which is just bordering on the threshold of overexposure, and it wonderfully complements the numerous white gowns that the cultists wear. Cinematography isn't everything. A film has to have a lot more going on than just visual prowess, but as cinematography goes, it's pretty good. At the very least, it's cinematography with a purpose, because I think it is there to seduce, to mesmerise the viewer. We are seduced along with these characters into this odd community, and odd being an understatement. No, they're not that bad really if you think about it. Also, the sound design adds to the specific atmosphere being presented. There's a great amount of silence to the scenes, and thus we are left or encouraged to digest all of the smaller, subtler sounds. The picking of the flowers, the clatter of crockery, the chirping of the birds, the gentle rustling of trees, the soft breezes of the wind. Not only is it a nice attention to detail, but it's focusing in on those details, giving them an extra bit of emphasis as if we're being encouraged to meditate and take everything in.
Everything just mechanically doing its part.
But never does this become too in your face where the sound design feels dead obvious and loud. It's just that perfect volume. You know, there's films where it's the most obvious sound design, it immediately takes you out of the film. It's like door creak. Someone's pouring water, it's like...
How long do they typically stand? We're gonna stand until it's right to sit.
Due to all this, the immersive value of this film is rather immense. I've got to say, it's a film you can almost fucking smell, man. You can feel the sun's weight on your face, the grass underneath your feet. It's incredible. It's an incredible piece of cinema. Specifically, during the dinner scenes, I'm immediately transported to this environment because the way in which it has replicated the experience of an outdoor meal is almost one-to-one. I hate to say the word feel, but you feel you're there. You feel you're there, brother. You're having a meal. You're having a meal in the sun. The heat. I wanted to emphasise how palpable this film's atmosphere was because it really is just the case. I know a lot of this may sound subjective, but I disagree. There are clear and intentional technical decisions that were made regarding the cinematography, the colour grading, the sound design and the audio mixing that all aided in creating this very concrete and observable aura, and that's just the fucking case. A film can't just be pretty, it has to draw you into its world, and that's exactly what this film does. However, I will now say that visceral immersion is just one thing, one factor of a film. A film also has to have at least a certain degree of narrative intrigue as well as a compelling set of characters. So let's now talk about what this film has to offer in those departments.
I mean, the more you respond, the more she's encouraged to keep
No,
this
I
crap
know.
up.
You're right. I just needed to be reminded. Thank you.
The film has a pretty solid opening hook with its prologue. It quickly establishes the main set of characters, the relationship dynamic between Christian and Dani, and then it hits you with this horrific family tragedy, instantly setting the tone while simultaneously placing Dani in an interesting yet dismal position story-wise. You are intrigued to find out where her character is going to go from this. How is she going to move away from this? How is she going to cope? You get a glimpse of how emotionally manipulative Christian can be as a boyfriend. The gaslighting begins a lot earlier than I initially remembered. It's like the first conversation they have and he's already pulling this shit.
Well, they don't let her. She's bipolar.
Yeah,
so.
I know, but you do though, babes. You go straight to crisis mode.
A key thing about this film that I noticed this time round was that each and every scene builds upon a central character trait. It's always in service of something, and everything is so immaculately interconnected. There isn't any wasted dialogue or character moments. If you take the first scene with Christian and his friends, then you'll notice that literally the very first line spoken by each of the characters corresponds with their precise role in Christian's story. The narrative function that they provide in regards to Christian's story is perfectly established here. You've got Mark, who's clearly a simple-minded douchebag and he's very anti-Dani.
You have got to get off the fence with this.
The worst aspects of Christian are embodied through him.
You've been wanting out of this stupid relationship for like a year now, and then you can find a chick who actually likes sex and doesn't drag you through a million hoops every day.
In his eyes, it's all Dani's fault. She's the one who's being unreasonable. She's being utterly detrimental to Christian's life.
She needs a therapist, dude.
She has a therapist.
Oh, so then she should call her therapist and not you. It's literally abuse. She's abusing you.
It's literally abuse. She's abusing you. Like, he's just a fucking idiot.
Dude.
It's the perfect representation of the mentality of someone who always perceives themselves as the victim. The first words spoken by Josh are challenging ones that bring up Christian's lack of investment in his college degree.
Do you think that there is a masochistic part of you that is playing out this particular drama to avoid the work you actually need to be doing?
And that is fitting, seeing as how Christian's academic rivalry with Josh will become a major part of the story.
What work do I need to be doing, Josh, exactly?
Well, I don't know, your prospectus, maybe your PhD.
Wow.
And then Pele, with no subtlety at all, just straight up foreshadows the end of the movie.
And don't forget about all the Swedish women you can impregnate in June.
Okay, guys.
Now, that's almost too on the nose. I might actually criticise that. Like, Jesus, Ari Aster. Fucking PewDiePie over here.
What a fucking May Queen.
But the fact remains that this is all done to foreshadow and simultaneously establish the central narrative function that these characters will be playing in the story. And again, immediately their characters are in service of something. As soon as they open their mouths, it all correlates with the themes. And the film does not waste any time. It immediately hits us with that morbid-ass gut punch of the girl's whole family being killed. It's not just a case of the disturbed sister killing herself. No, she took the parents with her. Great. It's a level of misfortune that's almost perverse. And when Christian answers that phone and you hear Dani wailing...
Hey. Dani. Babe.
That honestly might be the most disconcerting moment of the whole film. The unfathomable despair she's been subjected to. Florence Pugh does a fantastic job here just through the sound she makes.
Babe.
And what's also great is there's nothing supernatural about it. It's just the sheer horror of grief, and that's a very real thing. And when horror films can reflect the malevolence of these things we experience in real life, it's always great. The terror of these true-to-life emotions and concepts. And it's also the fact that it goes from Christian just enjoying a nice night with his friends. I know they're all douchebags, but if we just forget that part for a bit. This casual setting where everything's okay and chilled out and normal, and then it just hits you with that. He picks up the phone and he hears that. It just reminds me of those situations where you are having a good time and then you're hit with like a horrendous piece of news about someone dying or something. You think you're safe in a happy environment and then you get a big kick in the balls. Sucks the cheer out of reality.
Hey.
I love how Ari Aster uses the horror genre to depict grief. It's the same with Hereditary, this perverse deterioration of the family unit, and it's the real world things that prove to be the scariest aspects of the film. Like, imagine being that lad when his little sister's head goes flying off. Like, what the hell would you do in that situation? Like, what the actual fuck? Because on the surface, that isn't a supernatural event, that's just a freak accident. You've even got that shot of Christian comforting Dani from Midsommar that quite overtly mirrors the scene with Toni Collette where she's grieving over her daughter in Hereditary.
I just want to die.
Two scenes of just immense grief that almost cripples the person. Just a quick update on the whole Wicker Man comparison thing. Does the Wicker Man have any of these themes of grief in that? No, it doesn't. Does it fuck? I love the Wicker Man. It's a 5-star film on Letterboxd, but does it have this? I even partially feel sorry for Christian here too, because I relate to his experience in this situation as well. If you just forget about all his other characteristics for a minute, you just forget the fact that he's probably a Zack Snyder fan or something horrible like that. Imagine that you're in a relationship that you don't really want to be in, and part of it sort of scares you, and you're umming and ahhing about whether to break up with her, but you don't know, you don't like confrontation really. And then this happens to the girl that you're seeing. You're effectively trapped, and there's no possible way you can dump that person now. And it sounds awfully selfish, but just think of that burden that he has to carry. For me, it's anxiety inducing, that concept. I will say I have this acute fear of comforting the bereaved because it's such a big responsibility. It really stirs the anxiety boiling pot inside me that's going like, I'm not equipped for this, what the hell do I say? What if I say the wrong thing? You have an obligation to do it, I'm not saying it's any other way, I'm not saying you should flunk out of it or anything, like that isn't the moral of the story. But it is just scary in how overwhelming it is. Despite that, that is the most amount of sympathy that Christian is going to get in this video, because regardless of all the things I just mentioned, he handles it like shit.
Maybe I should just go home.
What? No. I'm just trying to understand.
This is a cautionary tale of what not to do in this situation, because this guy's a fucking tool. Instead of coming to terms with his own doubts and uncertainties, he just projects it onto Dani, resentfully blaming her for his inner turmoil. He's a giant pussy who never takes responsibility for anything, and that comes out in rather sinister ways, but it's also just pathetic.
Well, what do you mean? Because I told you I wanted to go.
Okay, fine, but I didn't know you were going.
I just decided today. I wasn't keeping it from you.
You already have a ticket.
I'm sorry.
He lies, man. He lies like a fucking idiot. Manipulates Dani into always thinking she's in the wrong. The term gaslighting is a word that gets thrown around a lot, and it's kind of become overused, but it is fitting here. It's essentially the process of using lies and emotional manipulation to convince someone that they're in the wrong when they're in fact not. And the depiction of that in this is expertly put to screen. It's actually nasty to watch. It's so well done that I'd say watch Midsommar if you want to know what gaslighting is, because it's like a perfect definition. You just need to pick one scene from the opening to find evidence of this.
Well, I just apologized, Dani.
You didn't apologize. You said sorry, which sounds more like too bad.
Maybe I should just go home.
What? No. I'm just trying to understand.
And of course, the manipulation works on her because she's an adolescent, but she's also emotionally vulnerable, extremely fragile and fearful.
I really think I should just leave.
No. Please. I'm not trying to attack you. I'm not.
It really feels like you are.
Well then I'm sorry.
And a little later on in the film, she literally says, oh, well, he forgot it was my birthday, but it was my fault because I forgot to remind him, because fucking hell.
No. I forgot to remind him, and it's not his fault.
It's bad. She is cooked. This bitch is cooked. What a cock-handed mess they've made of this relationship. Now let's add a cult and see what happens. See if that adds to the nasty mixing pot. But there you go, that's Midsommar. It's taking these horrendously broken people and putting them in this hippie, commune, nasty folk cult setting, and seeing how that brings out or exacerbates, to quote Shaun of the Dead, their flaws. The way that Christian haphazardly, impromptuly invites Dani to the holiday is just the markings of an utter pillock.
And just so we're clear, you guys told me to invite her, and you all know that she's coming. Agreed?
Yep.
Hey.
Hey, babe.
Because he pisses all his friends off in the process, and that's the thing about him. In his utter self-delusion, he fucks everyone else's shit up. It's not just Dani, I mean, she suffers the worst of it, but his friends suffer from it too, like his indecision. Oh yeah, guys, by the way, I just invited my girlfriend on holiday with us without consulting any of you about it, but you now have to go along with it as if you're cool and act all nice with her because I fucked this up for all of you. He's such a douchebag, man. He's like the most unlikable person, almost. What a miserable and agonizing start to a movie. So from there, the film becomes this deconstruction of Dani and Christian's relationship via the archaic Midsommar festivities that they attend. But for as much as it's deconstructing their romantic relationship, the film also showcases the erosion of Christian's group of friends. In fact, that's almost its own separate movie. I think the first time watching, you're more so focused on Dani and Christian's dynamic that you don't really pick up on all of the nuances that go into this, should we say, B-plot. So in this group of friends, you have Christian, you have Josh, who is the preppy, nose in his book kind of guy. Then you have Mark, who's just the atypical asshole, just there to sleep with a bunch of Swedish chicks, apparently.
Oh my god, the women here.
Finally, you have Pele, who's more so an extension of the cult rather than the friend group, I'd say. He's the reason they're all there. He's essentially scouted them all out so they can unknowingly fulfill all of these roles in the various rituals, or at least for the final ritual. This is more on the interpretation side, but I think that he ingratiated himself into Christian's group of friends and then found Dani and saw the makings of a May Queen in her. He also discovered Christian and thought, I'm going to pitch this guy to the guys back home and see if he's eligible to have sex with this 15-year-old and impregnate her. I don't think that Christian and Dani were indefinitely selected for these roles. I just think that Pele saw them and said, these guys kind of fit the bill for these various archetypes we need for the rituals. Dani's being the May Queen and Christian's being the impregnator.
And to Pelle, who has brought new blood and our new May Queen.
Another crucial element that stood out to me on rewatch was the rivalry between Josh and Christian over essentially Christian leeching off of Josh's research. The scene where he approaches Josh and he's like, oh yeah, I want to do my thesis on this community too. Is that cool?
I've decided I'm going to do it here on Horga. And I wanted to tell you first, just so it didn't seem like I wasn't telling you.
I feel like I can't tell if you're joking.
You see Christian exhibit all of the slimy and pseudo-jovial mannerisms that he puts on around Dani.
I've been thinking about something that I wanted to ask you, or tell you, actually. If you're going to do it here too, I'm open to collaborating. And if not, I guess we can both do separate theses on the Horgas.
You learn that he's not only a bad and irresponsible boyfriend, but he's just a bad and irresponsible friend outright. His indecision towards what he wants relationship-wise actively wounds Dani, and now his indecision pertaining to what his thesis will be on is sabotaging Josh's own success. He's just a lousy coward. The scene with him and Josh is actually quite a satisfying moment because it's the first time we get an eloquent description of all of Christian's flaws through the telling off that Josh gives him.
It's actually kind of outrageously unsubtle, the fact that you're being this bald about it. I'm honestly kind of impressed. That's why you look so guilty right now, because you know that what you're doing is unethical and leechy and lazy, and frankly, it's kind of sad.
Of course, Christian just shrugs it all off in his usual sly manner and is like, well, if you want to be that way, I was willing to collaborate, but if you've decided to do that, you want to go down that road, then my hands are tied, so what a shame you've decided to do this. More gaslighting, denying his obvious wrongdoings and passing blame onto the victim. I should be a couples counsellor, I think I'd be really good at it. On a chart of likability, Josh certainly ranks higher than Christian, but I wouldn't let Josh off the hook just yet, because his intellectual obsessiveness is rather troubling in its own right. It is his academic agenda that causes him, or more so allows him, to shut down his moral faculties as he bears witness to these horrible atrocities performed by the cult. He is a very cold individual. He never really conveys any empathy, especially towards Dani, who you think out of courtesy you might like offer a few words of condolence here and there. But none of that really, nothing. Get out of my way, Thought, I'm trying to goon on Swedish folklore. Most pressingly, he knew what was going to transpire on the cliffside ritual, and instead of being like, Jesus, we need to get the fuck out of Dodge here, fuck this noise, lads, let's boogie, he's like, oh, how intriguing, oh, please tell me more about this. Oh, it's very, very interesting culturally speaking, of course. I do think it is a good reflection of this amorality that you can exhibit from these real life, preppy, undergraduate robots, so engrossed in their pursuit of knowledge that they lose all humanity. This is where the Mark Zuckerbergs come from. So these are his specific shortcomings, and as the film goes on, he grows more and more distant from his group of friends. This rivalry he has with Christian only makes him ponder more aggressively over his research. It's this vicious downward spiral where his lust for knowledge only bolsters. We got a gooner over here. Picture it this way for the film fans, just in case you don't understand where Josh is coming from. So say that you were going to make a one-piece video essay, like a 3-hour one-piece video essay, and you were including the manga. You'd read the manga, you'd watched the anime, and you'd watched the Netflix show, and you were going to do a whole huge like video essay thesis on it. And then your dude bro mate comes over who's only watched the Netflix series and says, you know what, I also want to make a 3-hour video essay because it's actually a really deep philosophical show. And it's like, no, you didn't read the manga, you didn't watch the anime, I've been here since the beginning.
You're splitting it with Josh as well.
Yeah, I already told him I'm totally fine with that.
It gets to the point where during one particular scene, he's lost all awareness for anything exterior to his agenda. His friend is in danger, like literally there's a threat on his life, and he doesn't even notice, he's not even listening.
Dude, is she gonna kill me?
Did you learn anything about the Ruby Rotter?
I'll be back, I guess. She's gonna show me.
Come nightfall, both Josh and Mark will meet their end, but just before then, we see that Josh has become 100% enveloped by his paranoid intellectual hunt. Compared to the rest of the characters, Josh has a very unique downfall. It's an aspect of Midsommar that isn't discussed as much, but it's just as well conceived as everything else in the movie. And that particular scene as well is a great moment where each character is totally lost in their own downward spiral, all entranced in negative thoughts and hardly noticing each other's existence. Mark's literally about to get killed and none of them give a shit. The feud between Christian and Josh is also interesting because it's a bit of a mystery as to how instrumental the cult are in their falling out, as in how much the cult facilitate in it. There are definitely some hints that Pele / the cult wanted them to fall out to a certain degree. Pele seems to favourite Christian over Josh, being more accommodating to his research endeavours than to Josh's, and this plays a huge role in fanning the flames of Josh's paranoia as he only gets more and more jealous because of this. It does feel like Pele is fucking with Josh intentionally, like he knows what effect this will have on him.
I thought you said you hadn't talked to him.
Fuck. No. Okay, look, I'll ask the elders, okay? Good.
And all of this leads to Josh secretly sneaking out at night to take pictures of the scripture, which is of course forbidden. And this of course gets him killed, but honestly it all seems like entrapment. It's all pre-planned, just like Dani's rise to becoming the May Queen. It's possible that Pele favourites Christian because he's the one that's been selected to impregnate the 15-year-old. Perhaps it's that Christian and Dani have precise roles to fill and all of the others are just expendable, sacrificial fodder. But all in all, it doesn't really matter that much to me because it's the infighting of the group and the succumbing to their own flaws that is the interesting narrative. Honestly, the cult aspect is just a backdrop to the character journeys of these 4 people. Another reason why this film is fundamentally unique from The Wicker Man, which is much more of a straightforward horror film. I wouldn't say the cult planned all of the events out, I just think they had this vague agenda and things just seemed to pan out in that way. It's not as if they predicted that Mark would piss on their ancestral tree, that's just something that happened and they reacted to it. That being said, it really was only a matter of time before Mark did something stupid and disrespectful that would get him killed. He's an arrogant prick and fittingly this results in his demise.
Dude, I'm so hungry. It's like they're trying to make it gross.
Speaking of Mark, when it comes to criticisms I may have with this film, I think he is a little too over the top in terms of this obnoxious douchebag.
Dude, we can't take him at different times. They'll be totally separate trips.
It's almost too cartoonish or too archetypal where he's just, oh dude bro, I want to get some pussy. However, that being said, this time round I really did enjoy what his character was all about. I did appreciate his overtly assaholic nature because it does provide a lot of comedic relief, which is obviously quite a few and far between thing in this film. You can always hear him just talking out his ass in the background. It is really amusing.
Yeah, what do you do when you need to jerk off? Especially with all these dicks on the wall. There's a lot of dicks. Oh, no, you got some pussy paintings too.
There's this semi-running bit where he's worried about ticks because he hears that it's a big problem in Sweden, and he's like, what?
Last summer, a record number of people got tick-borne encephalitis.
What the fuck? Are you serious?
Then later when they're all going to bed, you can hear him in the background going, hey bro, can you check my back for ticks?
No. Check my scalp for ticks, then I'll check yours.
They're well-timed sprinkles of comedy that I only picked up on my recent rewatch. I remember when I watched it for the first time, I was with mates, and one of them had like taken the drugs that they take in that one scene. I can't remember what the drugs were, I think they were shrooms. And when he's getting all mardy when Dani and Christian won't take it at the same time as them, and he's like, we'll have totally different trips. I remember my friend going, these guys are fucking idiot, because that's not how shrooms work. You don't like sync up with each other.
We can't take them at different times. They'll be totally separate trips.
We'll have totally different trips. I know that was just a little anecdote that was quite funny.
Hey, what? What? Okay, relax.
I love when he's just pissed on the ashes of the dead, and he's like, what? I didn't know.
You pissed on the ancestral tree.
The tree? So
Yes,
what?
yes.
So what?
Yeah, I know, but it's important to us.
I just had to pee. I didn't know it was special.
And brilliantly, this might be the funniest moment of the whole film. So there's that cult woman who's sort of into him. You don't really know what her true intentions are, but she's always giving him the eye and he kind of fancies her. And she's speaking in Swedish to Pelle going, okay, I'm going to try and get this guy off the hook. I'm going to try and plead with the elders. And Pelle's kind of like reiterating it to Mark.
What did she say?
She said it's gonna be okay, and she will talk to Ulf and apologize for her mistake.
And then after hearing all that, Mark just says, oh yeah, what else you say about me? Like, Jesus.
Seriously?
Yeah.
What else did she say?
He's still trying to score and he's completely oblivious to the fact that he's just signed his own death warrant.
What else did she say?
Dude. Also, Mark vapes, so case fucking closed. He's a moron.
Do you think Mark's still off with that girl?
I wouldn't be surprised.
There's more evidence and or hints of the cult's puppeteering in Dani's storyline. I do think she was Pelle's priority, the centerpiece of the festival. I even had a thought that it might have been Pelle himself who entertained this idea of bringing Dani along on holiday to Christian in the first place. Because when Christian makes that decision, it's out of nowhere, it's abrupt, it's just to like save face essentially, just to stop the argument. But who knows, it may have been something sitting in the back burner because Pelle implanted that idea there at some point. In one of the early scenes where Dani has been invited by Christian and then she goes over to Christian's friend's place. First of all, not only is this an exquisite depiction of this specific scenario where the girlfriend's there but the mates don't really want her there but no one says anything. The girlfriend thinks she's welcome to come along but all the friends are kind of begrudging about it.
Yeah.
You're coming, right?
I mean, I guess so. That's not completely ruining your guys' plans.
Oh, no,
Not at all.
no.
But regardless, it's in this scene where we have the first interaction between Dani and Pelle, and he's actually the first person in the movie to treat Dani in this sympathetic manner. He's the only one there who actually talks to her, and the only one to behave warmly in her direction. It's the first instance in the film where Dani receives any semblance of compassion, and it's fitting seeing as how this is the beginning of the seduction.
I was so very sorry to hear about your loss.
Oh.
What happened? I mean, I can't even imagine.
And this interaction really does stand out because it's been quite a cold open and Christian has been utterly emotionally withholding. It's this open affection that will ultimately attract Dani into joining the cult, and already we, through Dani, feel this compassion, this sense of comfort and reassurance, brief as it may be. It's a breath of fresh air. It's like, oh, this is how people are supposed to behave to one another. I'm pointing this out because this is one of the central themes of Dani's character arc. This is how she gets lulled into the cult. And it's one thing for an audience to observe such a character transition, but it's an even more pressing thing for an audience to actually feel it. Feel the emotions of the main character, relate to her actions as well as the decisions she makes. Dani's entire journey is driven by a yearning to be held. That's literally how it's described in her second interaction she has with Pele.
But I have always felt held by a family. A real family.
Pele's words do a good job at summing up Dani's mental predicament in this scene, but one thing I took note of when rewatching it recently was that I, through Dani, was already thinking and feeling these sensibilities before they got told to me. The yearning to be held, or just the vast lonesomeness going on in Dani's brain.
He's my good friend and I like him, but Dani, do you feel held by him? Does he feel like home to you?
It's not one of those cases of the film insisting its themes upon the audience when it didn't really do a good job at making them feel it. And it's also one of the rare occasions where someone directly addresses the tragedy that befell Dani's family rather than just skirting around the issue. Up until this point, Dani's been encouraged to bottle up these emotions because it's an inconvenience or it's a burden on Christian. But now we feel this partial weight being lifted off us as we're finally allowed to process some of the grief.
So believe me when I tell you that I know what it's like, because I really, really do.
With what we've witnessed of Dani and Christian's relationship, we have experienced a drought of love and affection. Christian, Mark and Josh are all just useless, selfish arseholes, and then this cult comes along and provides something that we sorely need. And by the way, I'm referring to Dani, the audience, and myself as one entity here. Again, it's not that Pele's words here are insisting we feel a certain way. It's more so summing up an emotion that we were already experiencing. And I'm prefacing this, by the way, because so many movies have these certain beats or themes, ideas, motifs, whatever, where they try and insist things upon us. They go, okay, here's the moment where you feel sad, or here's the moment where the character has an amazing epiphany and it's really profound, when you don't feel any of it at all. Because it hasn't put in the effort of creating a properly developed character arc or character journey per se. Here, I am 100% on board with Dani's thoughts and feelings, and I get why she'd be attracted to this cult. And because of all this, the seductive elements of the cult create tangible emotions within the viewer, and you begin to feel partially seduced and mesmerized by the cult yourself. You can empathize with why a person in Dani's position would be attracted to this group of people. We've seen her dismal life at university with these vacant-ass friends, so when we arrive at this seemingly loving commune, it's a stark contrast. The luminescent cinematography serves as an adoring set of arms that wrap around us. This strange community are the first people to accord Dani with any ounce of kindness. Kindness that her fragile self desperately needs because she's literally been malnourished in that department.
Hey, please, come on. Can you come and sit with me, please?
The simple matter is, the cult provide for Dani in all of the vital areas where Christian falls short. It's a lot like how in Harry Potter the Philosopher's Stone we first see Harry's awful home life with the Dursleys, or whoever they're called, and then we're invited into this fantastical world of Hogwarts where finally we feel accepted. You feel what Harry's feeling on that first night of Hogwarts where he's looking out of the dorm window and he's like, yeah, I could get used to this. It's exactly the same as that actually, except here the cult are a conniving, malignant force that are preying upon Dani's vulnerability, but aside from that, we get more hints that Dani has been especially pre-selected throughout all of these warm welcomes that she receives from the cult members. It's never confirmed, it's never explicitly stated, but you get the sense that these people have not only been expecting her arrival, but have been eagerly anticipating it.
Hello, hello, welcome, hi. Welcome, hi. Welcome home.
Oh.
In a less subtle film, that would have been done like, and welcome home. And he like directly looks at Dani at that point like, and welcome home.
Hello, hello, welcome, hi. Welcome.
Oh, hell yeah, we gonna have some fun with y'all boys.
The film respects our intelligence enough to pick up on these details and never feels the need to include a scene where they go, oh yes, this was always part of the plan. We've had an eye on you for a while. This idea of her story being preordained is not only a plot beat but an actual theme of the movie, because you have that mural at the start which foreshadows all of the events of the film, and that gives off the impression that we are watching a process, a prophecy almost, something that was always going to happen. It's a creepy and foreboding idea, but it's also one that's oddly picturesque. Upon entering the compound, the film's narrative trajectory is guided by a series of rituals that the main cast of characters bear witness to. And for Dani, each ritual represents a key transitional state regarding her personal arc. Ritual 1, which is the cliffside ritual, is the first real dose of archaic degeneracy that we see on behalf of the cult. It acts as one of the early scares / tone setters, even though it actually occurs about an hour into the movie. And it's a moment that really stays with you too. The sound design of the bodies hitting the floor is unexpectedly soft. No! The deaths are unceremonious and almost pathetic, and it adds to that idea of this mortifying realism. And also it's the fact that it's this expansive shot where the bodies are ant-sized. It really gets over the fragility of the human body. Aside from the horror elements though, what I think this scene represents for Dani is it's her coming to terms with the death of her family, in particular the death of her parents, the elders so to speak. The film isn't even subtle with the thematic parallels between this cliffside ritual and the death of her family members. Later Dani has this vision which literally illustrates these similarities outright. But this experience gives Dani the opportunity to come to terms with the loss of her elders. Again, she's been repressing all of these emotions, and now she sees this unadulterated, monstrous depiction of death, and she's forced to face this harsh reality. Her initial reaction is utter flabbergasted shock, which puts her into this bewildered trance. After the ritual, when she wanders off on her own to process what just happened, I noticed that her behaviours were not emblematic of disgust or horror, but rather an overwhelming degree of pain and sorrow. Sorrow for the immensity of her bereavement. Again, it's the emotional horror. As fucked up as it may seem, Dani may have just gotten some catharsis out of what she just saw. She even resonates with the sentiment that it's supposed to elicit in the cult members.
And you need to understand it as a great joy for them.
Joy?
Yes, and when it's my turn, it will be a great joy for me. It does no good dying, lashing back at the inevitable. It corrupts the spirit.
Maybe there is a part of her that was grieving in unison with them. Each of the main characters have a unique reaction to this barbarity, and their reaction is informed by their personal character flaws. Again, with Josh, he just observes the spectacle through an intellectual lens of study, hardly fazed by the ethical implications of what he just saw.
Holy shit, right?
Dude, of all the things to let me sleep through.
What?
And then we contrast this with how the Simon character reacts, which is more in line with what the audience is probably thinking, an average person's reaction.
Fuck this! You're fucked! Fuck! You're the fucking standing there watching! What the fuck is wrong with you?
And it does this to illustrate how far away our main characters are from normalcy, almost residing in a different state of consciousness entirely. All in all, this is one of the first examples where the cult perform an action that is simultaneously deplorable yet also oddly cathartic towards Dani. The director's cut offers an extra lakeside ritual which occurs not long after the cliffside one, and this is one of the major additions of the alternate cut, and I think it's one that's very justified. I like this sequence a lot. It adds to Dani's character arc, it foreshadows the bond that she'll develop with the female members of the commune, the position of authority that she'll ascend to near the end of the film.
Wait, stop! Nej! Sluta! Låt honom vara! Han har visat sitt mod! Sluta!
It is funny because due to all she's been through, I actually see her gradual rise to power as a positive thing. I'm not saying it actually is, but it's like my mind has been tricked into thinking so. Because compared to her life before, this is a welcome change up. It's like how part of you enjoys Paul Atreides' rise to power despite where that leads. Part of us finds it triumphant or inspiring even. Right after the second ritual, we get another scene which is also unique to the director's cut. It's an extra argument that she has with Christian. Oh yes, I really love couples arguing, so I'm really glad we got more of that content.
Can you spare our relationship your textbook psychology keywords?
Honestly, in retrospect, this seems like quite a vital piece of the story, so it's odd that it was omitted. This is their first interaction where Dani stands up for herself to some extent, even addresses some of their relationship problems head on.
We've been in this for a while. You've been trying to pull away, and I've been in denial.
After the lake ritual, it is clear that she has become partially empowered and is now brave enough to challenge Christian. She's actually started to face how scuffed their relationship is, and it's a very satisfying character moment, honestly. Because of this newfound honesty from Dani, we see Christian double down on the emotional manipulation, the gaslighting, etc. He appears even more pathetic and malicious. He's like, oh, you shouldn't have picked those flowers for me because that's targeted affection. When you act nice in my direction, that makes me feel guilty, so you're really horrible for doing that.
When you casually gift me an impromptu bouquet of flowers, that just makes me think, how and when am I supposed to pay that back?
Dude's a fucking buffoon, he's a schmuck! The third ritual, if you could call it that, is the maypole dance, and oh no, it's a maypole, isn't that derivative of the Wicker Man, because that film has the trademark on maypoles. This is the scene where Dani really gets accepted and ingratiated into the cult, where we see her properly start to befriend the other women, and if you remove the larger context, it is actually quite wholesome. Leading up to this moment, we had a few scenes that showcased her gradual pulling away from Christian. Christian becomes absorbed by his rivalry with Josh and begins to blatantly ignore Dani, so Dani just goes, okay, I'm gonna go off over here, do my own thing, and make pies with the women. Sod you, I'm gonna hang out with these lot, they're actually fun, and they're nice to me. A good thing about Dani's character is that she's not dumb. She may be in this really toxic relationship with this douchebag, but that's down to emotional fragility. She's no fool, because at least subconsciously she's always been aware of who Christian really is. It just took her joining a cult for those subconscious feelings to bubble to the surface. There is a key scene where Dani realizes that Christian is just a selfish knob. So here she's trying to get his attention and failing, and the only thing to draw his gaze is Josh entering the scripture room with the elder. He's only concerned with his own self-seeking goals, and Dani picks up on this and simply walks away. This is all told visually and with one simple shot. It's the cinematic language being used to its fullest potential. We can read all of the thoughts on Florence Pugh's face as she contemplates why she's still even bothering with this jagoff. It's like a whole story just in one shot.
Simon left without Connie.
Jesus, really?
Yeah.
On the subject of couples, actually,
Okay, so he's ignoring me. This guy actually sucks, come to think about it. He's not even pretending to care about me at this point. Oh wait, something's caught his attention. What could be so important that he... Oh, of course, he's just jealous of Josh poaching research off him. Well, you know what? I'm just about sick of this. I'm gonna go off with the girls and make pies. Again, nothing is directly told or said to the audience. It's all done visually. There are numerous examples of these little details throughout the movie. It's a very thorough film. I recorded this additional segment to go over some of these details, so let's have fun and get into these little Easter eggs. Literally every waking moment, the characters are acting in accordance with their narrative function. Every scene in which they're featured in, you can usually see them off in the background behaving in a consistent manner to their character flaws. You can always see Josh sternly observing things, or you can always hear Mark saying something funny and douchey.
Yeah, what do you do when you need to jerk off?
Huh? That guy dismissed me, but this is exactly like the Saxon Saints and the Cult of Aphrodite.
Pella is always watching Dani and Christian at key moments.
I could see you possibly doing that.
By the way, I've been saying Pele instead of Pele this whole time, so that's great.
Fuck, no.
The first time Pella appears on screen, we can see him doodling his May Queen portrait. And also, look how happy he is here when he learns that Christian has invited Dani to the Swedish trip.
And just so we're clear, you guys told me to invite her, and you all know that she's coming. Agreed?
Yep.
Hey, guys.
Hey.
Yo.
Hey.
He's the only one here that's actually psyched that she's coming. Often in Midsommar's scenes, there's two things transpiring at once, one thing off in the background and one in the foreground. So on rewatch, you get completely new experiences from each scene. Here Christian is asking the commune member about incest, and then he's distracted by Josh entering the scripture room. But you can still hear the cultist's answer, to which Christian isn't paying attention to, but it's basically a description of the role that Christian will later fulfill.
Well, the bloodlines are very well preserved. So the elders must approve mates. So we often need to invite outside people,
There's this excellent moment where Mark is being lured off to his death and no one notices. The camera gradually transitions from Mark walking away into a trap to Josh obsessing over his research. Josh, who is so consumed by his academic agenda, pays no attention to Mark, and the camera moves so that his head is blocking out Mark in the background, illustrating a very literal blocking of perception. The view is overtaken by his intellectual pursuit, his mind, his brain, his head. In the same scene, there's a subtle extended shot of Dani deducing that there's a romantic connection between Christian and the ginger nut. That's all I can really say what her name is. Maya. Fuck! When Christian presents Dani with that impromptu birthday cake, Dani is more interested in the women caring for the baby off in the background. It's the sight of a motherly community, a loving family, the precise virtues that will attract Dani to joining the cult.
Happy birthday to you.
What are you, a retard?
I also noticed that each of the four main characters, that being the four guests that Pella brought from outside, each have their own unique temptation, and you can always see them being distracted or led astray by these temptations throughout the movie. Dani's, of course, is family love, Josh's is the scripture, which is knowledge, Christian's being the underage redhead, which essentially to him represents promiscuity, and finally you have Mark, who probably has the most simplistic temptation. He just wants to get laid. It's just basic lust. And this is personified by the female cult member who keeps making the eyes at him. Each of the four guests are also partially attributed an archetype by the cult. Dani is the May Queen, Christian is the impregnator, or like the bearer of the seed, so to speak. Josh is the scholar, and Mark is the fool. You can see these archetypes being depicted in the opening mural. It's very much like Willy Wonka, where you have the 5 kids with all the different flaws and they meet different ends. I'm not even joking, it is kind of like Willy Wonka.
Hold your breath. Make a wish. Count to 3.
I also need to mention the long takes. So there are numerous extended shots in this film, extended sequences. They're the kind of long takes that you don't notice because they're seamless and they're doing their job, which is to immerse the viewer. Almost entire narrative beats play out in one shot. Mini character arcs are occurring and dynamics changing. The camera is always moving and shots transition to become entirely new ones. Long takes are an overdone thing, but these are the kind that I actually appreciate because you don't notice them, they aren't show-offy. Their only purpose is to serve their filmmaking function, which is to elevate the visual storytelling of the film. It's just doing its job, you're utterly engrossed by what's on screen. And finally, as this adjoining segment comes to a close, I should mention some of the differences between the director's and theatrical cut, differences and changes that I personally really appreciated. So I think the director's cut is easily the better movie of the two. So not only do you have that extra nighttime ritual, but you also have so many scenes that add to Josh and Mark's characters. They're given more screen time, they're more fleshed out in the director's cut. Mark has a lot more funny lines that add to the comedic aspect of the film. It makes the director's cut a funnier movie. There's also more footage of Christian gaslighting Dani, which is always intriguing to see in a sinister way. All of the additions are welcome ones. There's no added fat, it doesn't screw up the pacing in any way. It simply gives the film more definition regarding the themes and the characters. It's substantive, it's meaty, I love it. End of segment. When Christian unknowingly drinks period blood, that's not told to the audience either. You just see the difference between his drink and everyone else's at the table, and it's a great little visual. Horrible and disgusting, but cool. What the fuck is that? Speaking of which, it is time we got onto that subject. So whilst Dani is off in this rigged dancing competition that ensures she'll win, Christian also has his descent in that he becomes a nonce, and I'm not even joking, like that's his fate in this. He's seduced by a 15-year-old girl. In all seriousness, I did like this storyline. I think the temptation was emblematic of his sexual inhibitions. All this time, he's had this desire to be free and sexually promiscuous. Dani wanted to be held, and Christian wanted freedom, in a way. They ultimately both get what they want, just in very macabre ways.
You know, I think my sister Maya is taking a liking to you.
Yeah?
This is going to be clipped out of context, but back to the underage girl element, aside from that being something that I could see the cult realistically endorsing, I'm a little puzzled as to why it's included in the movie. As in, I don't think Christian's entire character was all about him becoming a nonce. I think it may be saying something about the carnal desire within all men to lay with the pure virgin, so to speak. This fucked up yearning we have to claim one's maidenhead, maybe. Men always wanting the newest, youngest model, but this is all kind of bordering into speculation territory now. The sex scene that occurs as the culmination of this character descent is graphic, bizarre, but strangely elegant. Again, like a mural. It's one of those visually provocative scenes that certainly sticks in your brain. I love it on a cinematographic level, but more pressingly, I love it for the character-defining moment that it is for Christian. And it reminds me of other great movies that depict lust in similarly graphic ways. This coincides with Dani winning the dance and being adored by her new female entourage. Unfortunately though, she catches a glimpse of Christian's unfaithfulness and this sends her into a fit of despair. Immediately following this, we get the penultimate moment of her story. I think this might be my favourite scene of the whole film, but who the fuck is keeping count? Dani wails in sorrow as she did at the start of the movie, weeps as she has numerous times in solitude throughout the story, only this time her entourage is there to share her burden, and this thematic beat is conveyed wonderfully through them mimicking her groans of pain. It's a very poignant, emotionally intense scene where we see this delegation of grief. Finally, she has what she desperately needed, a family to hold her. And honestly, watching this, it's almost a relief because she is technically being healed of her wounds. She's also accepting the loss of her late family as well as the inner anguish caused by her toxic relationship. Ultimately, at least strictly on an emotional level, she has succumbed to the compassionate draw of this community. It's just like Harry Potter. When the final sacrifice occurs and Christian gets toasted alive whilst wrapped in a bear costume, the feeling of expelling a toxic entity from your soul comes to mind. Even though its true nature is horrendous and savage, that closing sequence is presented to us as a celebration. And because this film has devoted so much of its runtime towards putting us in the headspace of Dani, the headspace of someone who at this point in the narrative would be euphoric at such a sight, we ourselves almost go along with this gleeful nature of the scene. And that final shot of Dani's face is wonderfully poignant. As Christian / the source of her anguish is incinerated, she gradually becomes more and more relieved. Her final expression is one of weightless bliss and then cut to black. Technically a happy ending for her, but oh wait, hang on, media literacy, we aren't supposed to think she's a good person. Murder is wrong, don't forget that. All seriousness, I'm done entertaining such idiotic brain-dead people, brain-dead takes. I don't care, challenging art is supposed to make you sympathise with disturbed individuals, messed up people, so fuck off. I think this goes without saying, but just in case I haven't prefaced this already, I think Florence Pugh is fantastic in this. She has been very successful in the years that followed Midsommar, and I am happy for her, but she hasn't been in anything remotely as impactful since. She acted her arse off in this, having to display a sprawling array of emotions. It would be really cool if she could have another highly demanding role like this. She became the face of grief in this. I've been rather complimentary of this film in this video video, but in my defense, the things that I've talked about and praised are just things that were in front of me. All these subtle details are in fact there, and I don't just think I'm buttressing up this film, I just think I'm pointing out what's there. However, I will now take some time to be a little more critical of the film. For one, the length. A lot of people have trouble with the length, and I understand why. Well, it's a mixture of length and also a slow pacing. It's a very quiet and serene film. I will say that I think the vast majority of the scenes build upon something, they all have a purpose. But perhaps the pacing isn't perfect, perhaps it slows down in places where it should be ramping up. There is this one particular moment in the third act of the film that has always felt off to me. It's right after the maypole dance and Dani goes off in a chariot and does like another ritual with the women. It comes just before the moment where Dani discovers Christian cheating on her. I've seen this film 3 times and each time I get the same experience at this same moment. It's this slight lull in the pacing where they go off and do this extra ritual and it just feels unnecessary. As if there's a little bit of fat there, just something that doesn't need to be and kind of interrupts the flow of the film for me. I just ever so slightly lose interest in the film at that moment. And I think the fact that it's happened each time without failure is an indication that I'm not crazy. It's just a case of there being one too many scenes in a moment where it was ramping up to something, and there's this partial interruption between 2 very big plot beats. Maybe they could have trimmed the sequence and arrived at her finding out about Christian sooner. And again, a third act is supposed to ramp up pacing wise. I'm mentioning all this as a way of saying that I understand why people struggle with this film. Pacing wise, it's not necessarily perfect and perhaps it's a tad indulgent. But then again, on that note, the extended cut doesn't worsen those flaws for me, because everything in the extended cut adds to the film in some way and they're very entertaining to sit through. Again, for me it's just that one precise moment near the end that fucks me up. The thing is, I wouldn't want to mess with the pacing too much or have it shortened, because we have such an astonishing character growth with Dani here. It's a delicate progression and it only worked as well as it did because it was done in this slow burn way. And I would not want to risk the integrity of that character arc by trying to make this film more accessible. I'd rather have this film be a bit bloated if it meant that the profundity of the narrative stayed intact. I'll take pacing flaws over narrative flaws. This film has a fair share of drug-taking scenes where the characters trip major balls, and they range from fairly creative to a little bit iffy. For the last 30 minutes or so, there's this wavy effect over everything, and for as much as I get that it's supposed to be mesmerizing and weird and Christian's tripping balls, it is a little bit of a rudimentary effect, I will say. A little unpolished, but experimental at the very least. You can't just put a Gaussian blur over everything and expect me not to notice. As for the Wicker Man comparison, I think that all of the things that I highlighted about this film in this review are attributes and traits that the Wicker Man does not have. It was made quite clear to me when reviewing this film that the experience I get when watching Midsommar is utterly unique from the experience that I get when watching The Wicker Man. I adore both of these films, but they provide very different things, and that's a good thing. An interesting question, is this A24's best film? And I think it's up there, at least. I think I did an A24 tier list, and I probably put it in the highest tier there, so what does that tell you? What do you want me to say, man? It's kino, it's creamy, it's dimensional. Due to various factors, the film has quite a divisive legacy, and I can understand that. Some people love it and think it's divine art, but others think it's a pretentious bore fest. I don't really begrudge anyone for not liking it. There are maybe a few things that it could have done better, and I wouldn't say it was faultless. I think it created its own original visual pastiche that we'll remember the same way we remember the ones of Evil Dead or The Thing. At the very least, it is a cult classic. And alas, we have come to the end of the review. Thank you so much for watching. That was a lot of fun. A lot of fun indeed. And remember to fucking subscribe. I'm glad I finally got round to doing this. This has been a video that's been in the back burner for a while now. I hope you enjoyed this. I'd love to talk extensively about other favourite films of mine. There's so many films I'd want to cover, like The Master, Under the Silver Lake, Clockwork Orange, Nope. If that's something you'd like to see, then do let me know in the comments section. Nope. I'm very tired. I've done a lot of recording today. I've done a lot of recording all of this week. and I need to start editing this, so aren't I a lucky bunny? You know, coming back to this, I was a little worried that I wouldn't like it because the A24 vibe thing has become a little oversaturated of late. I think Midsommar did inspire a lot of pretenders as well, and we had all of these derivative works. I don't blame the film for this, but because I am just quite tired of this quirky, ooh, it's a cult, ooh, wow, oh, weird people, ooh, creepy, artsy psycho horror, everyone's insane, watch out. That hurt my experience just a little bit when revisiting Midsommar because it was like they left a bad taste in my mouth. You know those kinds of films like The Menu or Saltburn where it's like morally grey is the new sexy. Fuck all that noise. Aside from that, if you have made it this far in the video, like right to the very end, you are a legend. Thank you so much. You deserve good things to come your way if you're watching me right now. Farewell and have a happy Midsummer Festival.